If Jesus wasn't the Passover lamb, then Christianity has a lot to answer for. So let's look at this topic today. Welcome to the Trump of God Ministries. We're glad you found us. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon so you can be notified of future videos. And stick around. We're going to have an awesome topic today. Some people would have Christians believe that Jesus was not the Passover lamb. I was watching a Jewish rabbi by the name of Tobias Singer who was doing precisely this. He was trying to prove using the Gospels that Jesus is not the Lamb of God and is not the Passover lamb. What he was trying to argue was that Jesus as the Passover lamb was a very late addition to the Gospels. And he stated that 3 out of the 4 Gospels show Jesus being crucified the day after Passover, and that only John, the latest of the 4 Gospels, actually showed Jesus as the Passover lamb. Now, if that is true, Christianity is in a lot of trouble. But we're going to take a closer look today and see if his argument holds any water. Now, first off, I'm going to go to the Gospels. And seeing that John is the latest gospel, I'm going to go to what most scholars think of as the earliest gospel, the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 14 and verse 12, where it reads, "And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, Where wilt thou that we go and prepare, that thou mayest eat the Passover?" Now, this is very poetic speak, obviously, but what they're saying is, hey, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is here. Where are we going to go eat? Okay, now Jesus gives them some certain instructions. And then in verse 17, it says, "And in the evening he cometh with the 12. So he came to eat when it came supper time. And a simple reading of this would have us believe that when Jesus came that evening, he sat down to the Passover dinner, but it wasn't the Passover dinner. And I want to try and prove it using not only the Gospels, but using the very Torah that Rabbi Tobias Singer was using. Now, the first thing I want to show here is that Mark chapter 12 says, "And the first day of unleavened bread had come." Now, what is this first day of unleavened bread? According to Jewish tradition and to rabbinical tradition, this would be the first day of the Passover Seder. Now, my question is, was the lamb slaughtered on the first day of Passover Seder? And any Jew worth his salt would tell you that the first day of Seder, there is no lamb. It's only until the second day of Seder, on the 15th, where the lamb is slaughtered between the evening of Nisan or Habib the 14th to Nisan the 15th. And I want to go to the Old Testament and test this out and see if this is the case. So we're going to go to the book of Exodus, and we're going to go to chapter 12 and verse 6, where it's speaking of the Passover lamb. And it says, "And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening." Okay, so here we see that it's the 14th. They're keeping this animal until the 14th. And it is only once the evening comes of the 14th, which most Jewish would call Erev Peshach, or the eve of Passover, that the lamb is taken and is slaughtered between the two evenings, between the evening of the 14th and the evening of the 15th. That is the whole purpose of there being 2 days of the Passover Seder. The first day isn't where they sit down to eat the lamb. it is actually the second evening of the Passover Seder where they would sit down and eat the lamb. Now, interesting enough, according to the book of Leviticus, chapter 23 and verse 6 and beyond, where we're going to read, it states, well, we'll start at verse 5. It says, "In the 14th day of the first month, at even, is the Lord's Passover." So even though there is no Passover lamb on the 14th day, the book of Leviticus still calls that first day the Passover. And this is going to be very important when we do our reading of the Gospels. We have to keep this in mind and understand this if we are to understand the Gospels at all. Okay, so in the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. So the feast of unleavened bread and the feast of Pesach or Passover go hand in hand, and they actually start on the eve of the 14th of Nisan, which is the first Seder or Erev Pesach in most Jewish tradition. Now we can go back to the book of Mark, and we can look at this once again and see what exactly is going on here in chapter 14. Okay, now I'm going to read it again, having now understood what the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus are showing. "And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover," so understand this to be at that evening they were to kill the Passover, "his disciples said unto him, Where wilt thou that we go and prepare to eat the Passover?" Okay, now again, God instructs them to go to Mark's house. And in the house of Mark, they are preparing for the Passover that entire day. But if we understand Jewish tradition, we understand the importance of the disciples actually asking Jesus ahead of time, ahead of the first Seder, where they would go to prepare the Passover. And the reason for this is because it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, in Jewish tradition, there are two types of bread. There is chametz and there is matzah. Chametz is that bread that has been leavened or has been leavened with yeast. And what they have to do is before sundown, before nightfall, they have to go into the home where they are going to have that first Seder, and they have to inspect the entire home to make sure that there is no chametz left inside that home, because there is to be no unleavened bread in the home when they are going to have that first Seder dinner on the eve of the Passover or Erev Pesach. So that is what the Jews are saying to Jesus. That's what his disciples are saying to him. They're saying, where should we go? What home will we go into and inspect that there is no chametz left inside that home, that we might have this first Seder dinner? Now notice that Jesus in verse 17 doesn't show up until that evening, where he comes with the 12. And this is consistent throughout all of the Gospels. We'll look at the Gospel of Luke now in chapter 22. Okay, and we are going to read verse 7. It says, "Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed." So here again, we see where it is clarifying that on that eve, that Passover must be killed. They are realizing that this is the first Passover Seder, and they want to prepare. So they want to get rid of any chametz inside that home. And we'll read in chapter 22, verse 14 of the book of Luke, where it says, "And when the hour was come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him, and he said unto them, With desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." Now what Rabbi Tobias Singer is doing here is he is using people's ignorance of the Passover against them. Because the fact that Jesus says he wanted to eat this Passover dinner with them does not mean that the lamb was present on the table at the time that he sat down with them. And we can go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, where we were already read, and we see that even the 14th, on that first Seder, it's already called the Passover. So for Jesus to have called this the Passover, and that he was wanting and desired to eat this Passover with his disciples, in no way means that it was the Passover dinner where the lamb was present. Keep in mind now, and this is very important, when Jesus wanted to give a physical representation of his sacrifice, he took the bread and broke it and told his disciples, "Eat. This is my body that for us is broken. Do this in remembrance of me." Now this is key. This is key here, because had this been the Passover, he would not have needed to take the bread, because the Passover lamb would have been present. The fact that Jesus uses the bread as his body gives us understanding that this is the first Seder, and there is no lamb at the supper with his disciples. There is only the bread and the wine, and that's why he takes the bread to be his body and not the lamb. Something else to keep in mind is that according to Jewish tradition, the day begins at evening. So when Jesus sat down with his disciples that evening, he sat down on the eve of the 14th to have that first Seder. But it will be the 14th all that next day up until the crucifixion and even the burial of Jesus Christ. It is still the 14th, and that day is very sacred in Jewish tradition. It is known as the day of preparation. Okay, and that's a very key word to keep in mind, the day of preparation, because Rabbi Tobias stated that only John, the very latest of the Gospels, would bring up the day that Jesus was crucified as the day of the preparation or the slaughter of the Passover lamb. But we're going to see now that 3 out of the 4 Gospels actually state the same thing, including the very earliest of the Gospels, the book of Mark. If we go to chapter 15 of the book of Mark and verse 42, when Jesus is being taken down off the cross, it says, "And now, when the even was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, which also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate and craved the body of Jesus." Okay, Mark very clearly states that the day Jesus was on the cross was the day of preparation, and it was in preparation for the Sabbath. Now, another thing that we need to understand in Jewish tradition is that there is more than one type of Sabbath. There is the weekly Sabbath, which is what we understand today of as Saturday, but there was also the holy Sabbaths that were to be kept. And when we go to the book of Leviticus in chapter 23 and we continue to read, we understand that the actual day of the Passover where the lamb was to be eaten, that day was a Sabbath day to the Jews, because it was a high holy day unto the Jews. And we're going to see that. Okay, we're going to see that throughout the Gospels. Okay, it's going to become clearer and clearer. But Mark clearly states that this day was the day of preparation. Let's go to the book of Luke now and chapter 23, and we are going to see that in chapter 23 it states the very same thing. In verse 54 it says, "And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. And the women also which came with him from Galilee followed after and beheld the sepulchre and how his body was laid." So the day that Jesus is being buried is the day of preparation according to Luke. And he says that the Sabbath drew on, or the Sabbath was coming upon them. In other words, the sun was going down, the evening of the 15th would soon start, and they would have to be in their homes for the Sabbath and ready to eat the Passover dinner on the second day of Seder. Okay, now once we go to the book of John, that's where we clearly understand. If we go to chapter 19 and verse 14, we will again see, it says, "And it was the preparation of the Passover." So see, John is that much clearer, but it's not that John is coming up with a new concept. He is just seeing that Mark and Luke already stated this, but they were not clear, and the Gentiles would also be reading this one day, and they needed to understand. Now, once Jesus was crucified and his body is getting ready to be taken off the cross, in John chapter 19, verse 31, it says, "The Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day." But then John goes on to explain, he says, "For that Sabbath day was an high day." It was a high holy day for them. "Besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away." So see, John is not coming up with a new concept here. It isn't because John is a late gospel that it is presenting Jesus as the Passover lamb and being slaughtered between the two evenings of the 14th and the 15th of Nisan. It is actually John just bringing it into light what Mark and Luke already stated to us, that this was precisely the day of preparation and that Jesus indeed was the Passover lamb. We hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. You'll really be helping us. Hit the bell notification icon down below so you can be notified of future videos. And shalom.